The tragic story of the Menendez brothers. In the 1980s, the Menendez family appeared to have it all. Jose Menendez, a successful Cuban-American businessman, and his wife, Kitty, lived in a lavish Beverly Hills mansion with their two sons, Lyle and Eric. On the surface, the family had everything: wealth, privilege, and social status. But behind the doors of their pristine home, a darker reality was unfolding. The Menendez brothers had a childhood that was far from the perfect image their family projected. Though they were given the best education, the finest clothes, and extravagant vacations, their home life was filled with fear and torment. Jose Menendez, despite his outward success, was an abusive and controlling father. He had a volatile temper and could turn from charming to enraged at the drop of a hat. He belittled his sons constantly, demanding perfection from them while punishing them for any perceived shortcomings. Lyle, the older brother, faced verbal and physical abuse. He was often the target of his father's anger, and no matter how hard he tried, he could never seem to earn his approval. Eric, the younger brother, endured years of emotional and sexual abuse, a secret he carried in silence, deeply afraid of his father's wrath. But their mother, Kitty, was unable or unwilling to stop the abuse. Though there were signs of her own emotional struggle, she remained passive, unable to protect her children from the man who controlled their lives. As the years went by, the brothers grew more isolated, trapped in a home where love and safety were non-existent. In August of 1989, after years of escalating abuse, the brothers reached a breaking point. On the evening of August 20th, Lyle and Eric made a decision that would change their lives and the lives of many others forever. They entered their family's home armed with shotguns, determined to end the nightmare they had lived for so long. The plan was clear: kill their parents and the abuse, and claim the family's fortune for themselves. That night, they shot and killed their parents in cold blood. Their father, Jose, and their mother, Kitty, were both gunned down in their own home. The brothers then placed the guns down, seemingly unaffected by the act they had just committed. They called 911, pretending to be shocked, distraught, and helpless. When the police arrived, the brothers' story seemed to fit the mold of a typical home invasion gone wrong. They claimed that intruders had broken into the house and murdered their parents. But as investigators began to examine the crime scene, the story began to unravel. There were no signs of forced entry into the house, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. The way the bodies were positioned suggested that this was not the work of strangers, but something far more personal. As the weeks went by, the brothers' behavior raised more suspicions. While the community rallied behind them, offering condolences, Lyle and Eric seemed oddly calm for people who had just lost their parents. They began spending money lavishly, buying expensive cars, going on shopping sprees, and living life as if nothing had happened. Their actions caught the attention of the police. It wasn't long before the brothers were arrested. During their interrogation, the inconsistencies in their story became more apparent. They both claimed that they had killed their parents in self-defense, that they were acting out of fear and desperation. But as the investigation deepened, a much darker and more complicated story emerged. The defense team argued that the brothers had suffered years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of their father. They claimed that the killings were the result of battered person syndrome, a psychological condition where victims of long-term abuse can snap in a moment of terror and rage. Lyle and Eric's testimony in court was gut-wrenching. They described how their father had sexually abused Eric and how Lyle had been the recipient of constant verbal and physical attacks. The brothers revealed the pain and terror they had endured for years, living in constant fear of their father's wrath. For many, the revelation of the brothers' suffering sparked sympathy. It seemed impossible to ignore the years of torment they had experienced. But for others, the brutal murders of their parents could not be justified, no matter the abuse they had suffered. The prosecution argued that the brothers had killed their parents not just to stop the abuse, but to inherit their family's wealth. The trial captivated the nation. The case was as much about the murder as it was about the question of whether the brothers were truly victims or cold-blooded killers. The jury deliberated, and after a lengthy trial, the Menendez brothers were convicted of first-degree murder. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The story of the Menendez brothers remains one of the most controversial and debated criminal cases in American history. Were Lyle and Eric the victims of unspeakable abuse, driven to murder in a moment of desperation? Or were they simply ruthless killers, motivated by greed and a desire for their parents' fortune? The answers are still unclear, and the legacy of their crime endures. In the years since their conviction, the Menendez brothers have become symbols of both tragedy and controversy. Some see them as victims who were failed by the very system that was supposed to protect them, while others view them as criminals who took the lives of their parents in cold blood. Regardless of the side one takes, the Menendez case serves as a haunting reminder of how trauma, even when hidden behind the facade of wealth and privilege, can shape a person's actions in unimaginable ways. For Lyle and Eric, their lives were forever changed on that fateful night. The riches and fame they sought through their parents' deaths turned to dust, leaving them to serve life sentences in prison. But the question remains, who were the real victims in this tragic tale?